right, friends, Zig starting off. Today on the show we have Benjamin Jayne, a singer-songwriter out of Vermont. His album High Low was done with his sister, who is in Barcelona, his sister Amanda Wright, and they did it by sharing tracks and writing music and had an excuse to hang out. And now they have a follow-up album called Theater coming out May 7th. On all streaming platforms. It should be out by now. This is done in post. We're going to listen to the song Talking Heads off Theater. Benjamin Jayne, the album is Theater. Now out on all the streaming platforms, hopefully, unless those get mixed up. If not, it will be by May 7th. So, this podcast is mixed by Studio 44 CLE. If you have any visual, audio, or stream needs, make sure you reach out to Jay Sparrow from Studio 44 CLE. You can be reached at Studio 44 Cleveland on Facebook or studio44cleveland@gmail.com. Also, if you can like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast on all the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool people and sharing those insights with you. So without further ado, Benjamin Jayne. Family is clearly very musical.
Yeah.
But does that branch beyond the siblings?
Meaning parents, maybe?
Right. Or grandparents or cousins or
Yeah,
uncles?
absolutely, yeah. My grandfather, my mom's side, he played trombone in big bands traveling across the country.
Cool.
Yeah, and then my mom studied music, and then she taught piano for many years while she was doing other jobs and while she was going to school. And my dad also plays guitar and sings, and he was in a couple bands when he was in college. They did a couple records, and through his university. I guess that would have been Trinity up in Hartford.
Oh, wow.
So besides the siblings, I mean, we go back a couple, at least that I know, a couple generations that were pretty engrossed in it.
That's awesome. Do you think?
Yeah.
I was just reading about Carol Kay, and like I just keep seeing this trend of like my mom played piano and my dad played trombone. Like, why is that like fit those roles? Like,
I don't know.
why is piano feminine and why is a horn not?
That's good. I don't know. I'd never even associated with feminine or masculine, because I grew up on the piano too.
Yeah.
And some of the best piano. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why we gravitate towards the instruments we do.
I don't know. That's a good question. What brought you to the guitar? Like, did you start on piano?
Yeah, I started on the piano at 3, and most of the times I think people start on the piano because it's just this big, bulky instrument that's in your house. If you have one, it's hard to miss.
For sure. And it's easy to like. I push down. There's no question on the technique. Right. There it is. It's like a drum.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like a percussion instrument for a kid. It's pretty straightforward.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I have 6 siblings, and most of them, if not all, I guess all of them played an instrument. So there's always music, and there's a piano there. So I started banging on that, and having a mom as a teacher, she thought it was really important. So she started on us pretty early. Yeah.
That's so. Where do you fall in the sibling run? Middle?
I'm the youngest.
The youngest? Okay.
Yeah.
Dang. So like this next record after Theater, you gotta get the whole family in, and like hopefully everyone else is like scattered around the world, so it can be this crazy colossal sound. That's amazing. But yeah,
that'd be interesting.
What brought you to the guitar then from piano?
I play a bunch of instruments, and guitar wasn't the next one, but
okay. Then what was there like a progression
the
up?
next one would have been the snare drum.
Okay, that makes sense.
I'm not sure what like at your school if it was the same way, but at our elementary school, like 4th grade, they came around and showed you all these instruments, and you could pick which one you wanted to play if you wanted to play any. So 4th grade was that year for us, and I chose the snare. I did that for like a couple of years, and then I got turned on to the saxophone, and I did the saxophone then on out in school. I played that like in the jazz and concert bands.
Okay.
But then guitar came about. I guess I was probably Uh, I was probably about 11
Yeah.
when I started playing guitar.
Okay.
Um, and that was my parents split up when I was really young. I was 2. And then a couple. I had a stepfather when I was. I guess I was 11 when he came around, and he played blues guitar. He played out at bars and stuff. So he always had guitars around, and so I think he gave me my first guitar. It was either him or my dad. But my stepfather said if I could learn this blues lick, um, he would give me one of his guitars. So I remember that
Whoa.
distinctly. And
The
um,
challenge was set.
yeah, man,
What was
yeah.
it?
And
Do you remember the lick?
I don't remember the lick. I remember the guitar, and I wish I still had it. It was um, these lessons you learn when you're older. Never sell a musical instrument.
Right.
But it was just, it's not an expensive one, but it was the old Silvertone guitars.
Oh, okay. Nice.
That, and they were the ones that were like, the case was the amplifier, so you could, open up the case and plug in the case,
Right.
and yeah, you're set to
That's
go.
sick.
So yeah, that
Was
was that.
that so with a kind of branching from like a more like education music based background into guitar. Guitar is like this weird lingering like it fits into the like the ensembles and stuff, but like most guitar players can't read. You know what I mean? There's like this
Yeah,
there and it's kind of how the instrument's set up, right? Like it's very form based and so you're not really thinking about maybe as much notes as you would strictly on a piano. Like when you need to shift scales, you need to know where the flat is. On guitar, you just need to
yeah,
move your hand. Um,
yeah.
should know it, and that's kind of a big generalization. But did it make sense, like trying to pick it up and learn that lick to get that guitar, like
Yeah,
plunking
man.
at it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Did it
yeah,
click
right.
more deeper or more like clearly than like some of the other instruments? Or
Um, I don't know that it did, but I think you're right about the reading though. Like with piano, I could read tablature.
yeah,
I grew up, and that's how I started on it was reading. And then of course with concert and jazz bands with the saxophone, you have to.
right, right, and that's some
Um,
syncopated shit. It's not, it's more tricky.
yeah, for sure. You got to know. Yeah, you definitely know. You have to know how to read and what the timing is and all that. So yeah, guitar. I didn't. It was definitely more of a feel it out initially versus the others, which was definitely more educational back, more structured learning. But that isn't to say I didn't learn. I did learn how to read the guitar. So I did. I will say that I did it out of necessity. I didn't have real interest in doing it for the guitar, whereas I did for the piano and the saxophone.
Right. It, ma-
Um,
with piano, it makes more sense reading like in playing, and like with sax, that seems to be like the thing too. Like all the heads are written out. At least if you're doing like a jazz band, you probably ran the standards off like a fake chart or a real book
yeah, yeah.
chart,
You
and like
definitely have to have the charts. Yeah, unless you're at a jazz band and you're just doing improv and
right.
your ears are good. Yeah,
And you've known those standards like to the T. You're like, whatever, T for two, whatever, like roll it. But okay,
yeah,
so it's interesting that um, both your like kind of father figures like played out. Like what kind of music? You said your dad played in a few bands. What type of bands
yeah.
were they? Were they like blues rock bands, folk bands?
No, yeah, they're folk, definitely folk.
Yeah,
Yeah. So he would have been born in 47. So I think 47. So, he came up in the 60s, but not in the 60s that you would think about.
yeah.
He was a little bit before long hair and free loving. He was, and he had kids pretty early. So he was, um, when he was doing folk, was more of the earlier type traditional folk stuff. Um,
Like Peter, Paul, and Mary stuff,
yeah,
or
kind of more in that vein.
okay,
And then the other band was like, trying to remember what it's called, but there's a lot of harmonies and a lot of members. So there's a lot of vocal work as well. So yeah, he was more traditional folk, I'd say.
That's sick. Like harmonies are hard to do. Like
Yeah, yeah,
and to do them live like that, like I don't know, that's interesting. And so then your stepdad was more of a blues guy, so you had like this
absolutely.
melding of like these two approaches, like blues music compared to like the structure of like a folk tune, right?
Yeah,
Everything's kind of like layered in a way where it's usually predictable the same way. You know what I mean? They like yeah, like as far as like if you have a harmony written, someone that those lyrics don't really change. Like, they're locked
yeah,
in. We're
yeah. They
like
definitely both have their forms. That's for sure.
right, and structure too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Now
yeah.
that's cool. So at the same time was your sister playing music, Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, we all, I think the piano was thrown at all of us. And she's a great pianist. I mean, she took it way further than I did. Um, she and my oldest sister Lisa also is a great pianist, and my oldest sister went to school and got a degree in classical piano. Um, but Amanda, yeah, she took to piano like, yeah, I mean, just brilliantly, and she played from probably similar age that I did up and through. I mean, she still plays, but she was at it pretty good for the 15 years, I'd say, in the beginning of her life. And then she moved on to the accordion.
Oh, cool. Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Have you tried the accordion?
Only Dink, kind of messing around in her apartment. Uh,
Okay.
just, but I mean, yeah, it's a little bit more, there's too much coordination going on for me.
Right.
So,
The buttons are weird. And is it a button or a key accord? Like buttons on both sides or a keyboard on one button
buttons
on the
and
other?
keys.
Okay, buttons and
Yeah.
keys.
Button. Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds like a
And
lame
there's
polka.
like 56 or seven. I don't know how many there are, but I don't know how you can remember where all those things go. Yeah. The coordination's crazy.
It's hard. I've tried myself.
Yeah.
Cause I play a little piano and like, but with the accordion, it's you learn all these shapes, right? You learn how to run scales, and then you got to flip it sideways, which is a little weird. But and those buttons move in the circle of fifths, going up, and then the fourths going down, like, and
Is that
it's
how they work? I have no idea.
yeah,
You're teaching me right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's like at least that's how the notes are laid out. I think it's fifths up, fourths down. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And if you go down the line, it's like minor, major, seven, dominant, diminished as far as like the chords.
Huh.
And then there's the counter bass on top of that, which is like the third of the chord. So if you're playing a
Yeah.
C, you have a E on top. It's fucked. That isn't. It's like it makes no sense. Like it does, but it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And I don't know. I don't remember how much she knows as far as reading. I know we were taught reading when we were younger, but I think she learned she didn't have a teacher for that. She figured that that was all by ear and just
Okay.
innate talent. She what is she? I guess she was 19, maybe 20 years old. She sold everything and moved to and went to Europe.
Right.
And she couldn't carry a piano around with her, so she got an accordion and
Oh,
she just
okay.
figured it
Yeah.
out.
It's practical. It makes sense. When did
Yeah.
she end up in Barcelona?
I think she ended up there pretty quick. She went there she went to Europe in '99. Um, and I think she pretty quickly ended up down there and just fell in love with it and has been there ever since.
It's awesome. Was it? Did she go out there for music or just to see the world?
I think it was to see the world.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think it
That's
was, yeah, I think she just wanted an adventure and um, she'd been doing a bunch of traveling here in the States too with a bunch of circuses and
wait. What?
yeah, not like traditional circuses.
Hold it. That's that's so sick. All right. So she was
Yeah.
traveling with like what? With like what type of circuses were they? Like I didn't know there was
Um,
multiple.
yeah, it was. Yeah, so we grew up in this. There was this farm nearby, and where we grew up, and we spent a lot of time there, and it was a very creative environment, and um, so there was varying, groups of troops would come by and crash at the farm when they were on tour with their circuses, and they're like, it'd be some music involved, some fire breathing, acrobatics, some elements of like puppetry. She also worked with Bread and Puppet up in Vermont a little bit, that troupe. So that was that came to us when we were growing up because of this farm, and so we were exposed to all those circuses and all these artists and musicians at this farm growing up. And then she kind of hooked up with a couple of them and traveled around the states. And I think she took my saxophone actually on that trip, and she learned how to play saxophone for that.
That's so sick. But it's adapting to the situation, and when there's an amount, a vast amount of just creativity in front of you, you want to be a part of it. And it's so kind of interesting that it was a barn,
A what?
a barn where all this was going
Oh, the
down.
farm. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
the
wasn't a
farm.
traditional farm like a
Okay.
dairy. It wasn't a dairy farm or like a where like a. It wasn't corn or anything. But it was a farm. I mean, they were a nursery. They grew plants, and like be it flowers and vegetables and stuff. Mostly flowers, but it was really just the people. I mean, it wasn't. It was a working farm for a stretch there, but for us, it just was this like, and for kids, it was just this miracle of a place where the family was just super creative, and it was almost like a farm that cultivated arts more than it was a farm of anything else. It was just people gravitated towards this spot, and people were there every day, 365 a year. There was a music room that sometimes would be jams going for literally 48 hours straight, where somebody would take a nap and somebody else would grab the instrument from them and keep on going. So this is that's the environment where he grew up in, and kind of cultivated a lot of what we know today. And we're just super lucky to have had that around.
That's
Um,
amazing. It's hard
yeah.
enough to find the creative epicenter of wherever you're at, especially at that age, and just kind of being
Yeah.
able to wait. How old were you when this was going on? Like,
Well, we met the son of the owners when we were probably like 7.
okay, so fuck yeah,
So we've known him since we were really young, but we started hanging out over there probably when I'd say I was 13, 14, and probably 14 when I started hanging out over there. And then it just became like a second home. Yeah.
that's amazing. To be in that creative epicenter at that young of age, especially 14, right, when you're trying to figure yourself out, and to be
Yeah.
around a bunch of people doing a bunch of different things like puppeteering and shit, and
Oh man, it was great.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? If I would show puppets to my students, they'd be like, "This is fucking lame." They'd
It's
be
all about context.
right. But being able to appreciate that and be engulfed in it when your environment changes and everyone in that is shifted and showing some respect for whatever's going on, even if it's just or appreciation. Let's put it that way for whatever art is being projected or shared.
Yeah.
That resonates deeply, and that opens up your mind to accept so many other things and see the art and the effort and the hard work that goes into fucking puppeteering and whatever the fuck else.
Hell yeah, man.
Like
That's a crazy art right there in itself.
right. Well,
Yeah.
it's just a crazy lesson to learn that it's hard to do that and be expressive and being able to convey yourself with a sock puppet or whatever. You know what I mean?
Speaking of that, I saw, and I don't want to get too off. I saw a guy from Brooklyn up here in Vermont do a
Yeah.
puppet show using socks that made me cry, man. I wish I could remember his name, but he was freaking brilliant. So yeah, man. If you, it doesn't, whatever the medium, if you can make it speak, if you have it, yeah. I would say one thing about this farm that was probably really, really impressed upon us when we were kids is that the adults treated us like we were adults. We were 14 years old, and we sat at the big table, and metaphorically, right?
Yeah.
They looked at us and treated us and respected us just as much as they did, their, the other adults. So it was just and I think that makes a big difference
Right.
for kids. You know what I mean?
For sure, because you're always kind of observing the adult thing and trying to figure it out, being like, "That's lame. I'm gonna keep playing with fucking action figures." To be
Yeah.
included in it is another thing. And do you remember? So, was there a particular instance where you were experienced that there for the first time?
Just that
Being
kind of
accept.
equity of, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's just I don't know if there's any one moment. It's just the moment you know.
Yeah.
It's just Yeah, I mean, I don't remember any moment where we weren't treated with, an equal amount of respect, and we weren't treated like we had, an equal amount of something to bring to the table. I mean, it was just, it was a cool, we grew up in rural Pennsylvania, about a mile from Lancaster County,
Okay.
in a town that had no stoplights, and horse and buggies were tied off at the local grain shop. I mean, it was like nowhereville. And to have this spot, it was just didn't make sense.
Right. Or it makes
um,
perfect sense. Like, what
or
else would
yeah,
be there?
yeah,
Like, wow. Was there a
yeah,
name? Do you remember? Did it have a name? Like, was there a name
yeah.
of
It's
this
called
place?
Cherrymont
Cherrymont
Farms.
Farms. That's.
Yeah.
It sounds so not exciting, but right? It just sounds like a place. But was that the family's
Yeah.
name?
No, it's just the name of the farm.
Okay.
The family was Jane Young and Pierre and Patrick Radabal were married back then, and they had a son Pierre,
Oh.
and they were also relatives of Aldous Huxley.
Oh.
Um, so Aldous Huxley's son Matthew had a parcel of land that was on the top of the hill
Okay.
on the edge of the farm's property. So it was those two families um, that, yeah, that was their space. So that was, yeah, I mean, just a really creative. I mean, imagine the people that would hang out with Aldous
Right.
Huxley and intellectual types, creative types, very unique types, and so it was pretty cool
That's
for
but
sure.
that's like a cesspool of life. You're getting philosophies from every angle, though. That's
Yeah,
sick.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
whatever did they end up diving into something crazy? Did they do the circus bit? Any of those, Pierre and like, or did he do any?
Pierre did. He was on the road all the time. I mean, I mean, he was all over the country and world doing this stuff. And the circuses that we were, I can't remember all their names, but they, you wouldn't have necessarily heard of them, but I remember one of them was called the End of the World Circus.
Okay,
And I think one was called Circus Know Nothing. I mean, these are, kind of uh, niche
yeah.
stuff.
Well, I mean, the circus itself is kind of a niche. You know, what I mean, like I'm trying to. I was just talking with this guy Marky Ray. He's a Cleveland legend. He was in what was the circus? Look it up really quick. Something that he was in a circus that like opened up for Nine Inch Nails. Like,
Oh, yeah, this is the type we're talking about then.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The Jim Rose Circus.
Huh. I wonder
Um,
if, yeah,
that's
I
a
wonder if they ran, if they
right.
crossed paths with some of these troops.
What did I wonder what a circus bill's like? Who opens first? Like,
I think it's about who's awake, who's ready.
right, right.
At least the ones that we were a part of. So
What a interesting like because the circus like has this a vast amount. It's like cinema in a way. Like you have all these
hmm
different elements, and it's not just one thing. Like with music, I mean, and this is getting kind of off course, but with music, we got the guitar and you're behind it, and you got the song. You can play in the coffee house and be ignored and still be considered successful. If you are ignored as like a circus, like it's
something's going wrong there.
yeah, you booked the wrong place or something did
Yeah.
not pan out. Like, but
Yeah.
how long did your sister do that? And like, was there a takeaway? Was she like, I'm not cut out for the circus, or like,
No, I don't think it was. I'm not cut out for it. I think it was just opportunities and people and scenes changed as she moved around and met different people.
okay,
So I guess um, I was young and we were sharing the same scene, but there was a lot of different things going on. So she was traveling when I was still in high school. She might have even still been in high school for some of it. I don't remember, but
cool,
I think she was on the road for maybe a year or two in the
yeah,
States, and then she got the itch to go over to Europe. And when she got over there, like I said, she got the accordion and she hooked up with a couple different bands and just toured all over Europe. And was doing kind of playing in, I guess it was kind of like gypsy klezmer.
okay,
Um, I'm not exactly how to describe the music, but it's definitely some gypsy elements. It's klezmer music and unique music.
Right.
at least
Some
to the States.
harmonic minor shit going on. Gypsy music's fucking
Sure. Yep.
sick. Um,
Hmm.
Nat, is any group she stuck with out there, or is she just doing her solo thing?
She was in a band called Dumbala Kanaya,
Okay.
um, and she was with them for a while. And I actually got an opportunity to go over there and play with them too, in '07.
Nice. Like
Whenever
sharing bills or like playing in the band?
playing in the band, yeah.
Well, okay. What was that like as far as like adapting to that?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I was 27 years old. I'd never been out of the country but for Canada, and I, flew over to Europe and was living in Barcelona for a few months.
Oh,
And
sick.
so it was just, yeah, I mean, I was wide-eyed and just loving the experience. And it was a different type of music for me, but there was a lot of jazz elements in
Right.
what they were doing, and I studied jazz and really dig jazz. So it was, yeah, I took to it pretty quickly, and the vibe of that type of music's so much different than what I do. So I loved it because I didn't do a lot of shows with them, but they were, um, they definitely left an impact on the energy, what the energy was like. Cause they'd be we played a couple festivals, and the energy that they and the audience had was really, really high. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
kind of fast paced, unique kind of klezmer jazz stuff going on, gypsy type stuff. And it was just positive, fun, fast, um, music. And I'm kind of historically, my music's not fun and fast.
It's got a space, and we'll get into that in a second. But this is fascinating. So
Hmm.
like with gypsy music, like that, there's energy to that. That shit bumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but you went to Berkeley, right? And you
Yeah.
studied jazz. But were you on the guitar going through Berkeley, or what was your main
Yep.
through Berkeley? Yeah. Okay. So at that
Yep.
point, guitar became your main. The other instruments kind of set aside. And is that where the I had to learn how to read came in?
No, I learned how to read in guitar in sixth, seventh, right off the bat.
Okay. So he did it smart
Um,
way.
yeah, I mean, it was just like I didn't do a whole lot of it, but the jazz band. I was playing sax in the concert and the jazz band. Um, and I remember there was a tune in seventh grade. There was a tune we were doing in a jazz band called "Walk Don't Run," old '50s. I think an old '50s tune, and it had a guitar part. And the guy asked me if I musical director asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said yeah, but I didn't know how to read. I didn't know how to translate. I mean, I knew how to read charts, but not. I wasn't to translate that to guitar. I hadn't done that before, so I did learn how to do it for that tune.
Right.
Unfortunately, I broke my arm and wasn't able to play
What?
it. Um,
Did you run? What the fuck?
what's that? Oh, yeah.
Did you run? You're
No,
not supposed to run.
I broke my arm. I was at my now stepbrother's house. He was my best friend then, and I was
Yeah.
at his house
Oh,
showing
yeah.
his mother that moshing is safe. And
What? Okay.
yeah, we tripped over each other's feet and fell down, and somehow my arms I mean, it snapped in half, and I mean, it pins and surgeries, and
Oh,
it was
fuck.
so I couldn't get my arm around to the neck to play it.
Right.
So, but that was the first chart I learned for guitar, um, and then I learned more charts for high school jazz band and
Right.
guitar. So I was doing a little bit of it.
God, that story is
Yeah.
crazy. So like, where you're like, this is Metallica, and this is cool because you can like what?
I think we were listening to Nirvana.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that kind of? What was the music you were diving into? Like
Uh,
just
the-
listening to, being surrounded by all this like amazing like jazz and like creativity, and like how do you even begin to find your own records? There's so much influence.
yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, yeah, everything. I mean, I can tell you the first cassette I ever bought was The Cure, "Standing on the Beach,"
Okay, cool.
and that was third grade.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so that was the first cassette I bought. Um, yeah, I'm the youngest of six, so I'm soaking up everything that my siblings had, and thankfully, in my opinion, they had good taste. And so I grew up listening to. This is young, this is single digits. I was, between 7 and 10. I was doing a lot of The Cure, REM. What else was going on there? There's definitely some U2 back in those back in the day. The Police, the Smiths, and then some punk rock, Dead Kennedys and Dead Milkmen, and
Sick.
yeah. So that was kind of like the majority. That kind of space was where my head was at when I was, under 11, 12. And then I was born in '80, so grunge was pretty big when I was 13, 12, 14 years old. So we were listening to Pearl Jam and Nirvana then.
Right. When you started
in middle school. Yeah, when I was starting to play guitar,
Yeah.
that was Nirvana was probably my favorite band when I was playing the guitar, like when I first picked it up.
That's
Yeah.
it. Still is. You can't. Those songs are still cool.
Right. Right. Mm.
But okay, cool. So when you started getting into songwriting, did you lean more towards like the Kurt Cobain inspired stuff? When did like songwriting become an art form that you felt you can like express your way through or convey yourself with?
I had a high school band. Yeah, I guess I started writing music when I was in ninth grade. And I was with roughly the same band throughout high school. So I wasn't doing any solo stuff. And in high school years, I was doing a lot. I followed the Dead my buddy had a VW bus, and we went on the road and followed the Dead around tour, and we were listening to a lot of Fish as well. So we were doing a little bit more of that kind of experimental jam bandy stuff in the band that I was in high school.
Okay. Did that like appeal to you because of your jazz kind of background?
Yeah, definitely. The Dead appealed to me. I started listening to Dead when I was in. Again, this is siblings influencing.
Right.
My sister took me to my first concert. I was in sixth grade and went to see Grateful Dead. So I was listening to them, probably from the age of around 11. So I dug their style. I mean, they had a lot of folk elements and some jazz elements, and mixed. It was a collage of jazz and folk and rock and bluegrass. It had everything. And then Fish, of course, a lot of improvisation and jazz influence. So yeah, it was probably easier to just pick a few chords and jam for 10 minutes than it was to actually maybe, or at least for me at that time, than it was to really structure a solid song.
Right. Well, it is. It's hard. You got to make more decisions, and when you're working with people that are learning music with you, you know what I mean? It's hard to be like, all right, B flat now. You know what I mean? Like, it's easier to like have a structure and then just kind of express yourself on top of it. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it speaks to what we were doing over at the farm too, because we were doing we did a lot of drum circles and had like jazz. There's a couple guys that were into jazz fusion. So when we were over at the farm, there was a lot of that going on. So we would jump in, and like I said before, where it was just kind of an open forum. If you had an instrument, you bring it, you plug it in, and so there's a lot of fusion jazz going on over there that I was getting into. So that influenced us a lot when we were in our band.
Interesting. Like that, hanging out with jazzers is always like an interesting, like picking their brains, how they play over changes and shit.
I never did that, and I should have.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was really a big ear player, and I didn't ask a lot of questions. I didn't watch too many fingers. It was really all about listening.
Well, that's just as important too. Like,
yeah. Well, although I wish I'd strengthened up the other areas, because the ear can get you so far. But yeah.
No, it's the balance of it all, right? It has to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. So, what was Berkeley like? Because I went to Cleveland State, and like, I don't know, those like big colleges like intimidated me, like as far as like going for music.
Berkeley was an interesting chapter.
Yeah. I mean, so far, you're coming from the circus farm. How is it getting more interesting?
It was a big change for sure, because there's a lot of structure there. There was a lot of really competent players.
Right.
I was not a good student in high school. Um, um, my mom's not going to be listening to this, but I was the sixth kid. She was essentially, I mean, there was a couple stepfathers in there, but
Yeah,
essentially she was the solo parent.
that's a
So
lot. It's a lot
there
for one
wasn't a lot of
person.
supervision going on there certain years. So I didn't really show up in high school. I mean,
Right.
literally and figuratively, and eventually they actually asked me to leave.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I went to, ended up going to like this kind of a hippie farm kind of arts high school, and then homeschooled the last year of my high school career. So I mean, I really did not engage in school.
Right.
So when I got to Berkeley, it was like a pretty big adjustment to one, you're paying for it, and
Yeah.
two, you got to show up. There's expectations, and it's for what you're into. So you really want to get into it. So there's a little bit of stress getting up into there and getting situated. But it was great. I mean, I lived in the dorms the first semester, and you just, you get down your pajamas and slippers and go into the practice corridors or the practice rooms and hear, some of the best,
Right.
any genre of music, the best everything was down there, and it was just awesome to go into the halls and listen to people practicing the piano, or it was like I remember one particular band, a Django kind of tribute group. Um,
The hot Berkeley quintet. The
yeah, I mean,
the
it was just the players were phenomenal. So that was intimidating and inspiring. And I was actually, and I'll tell you a little, I kind of got, when you go to Berkeley, you're supposed to get reviewed for placement at your level
right.
for
Damn.
your instrument.
Yeah.
And I didn't, for some reason, I missed that. And so I showed up, and then they were like, my buddy was like, he's my buddy now.
Yeah.
But I just met him. He's like, you need to have a prepared piece so they can evaluate you for placement. I said, oh shit. And like, I think the only music I think I had in the room was, and I don't know why I had it, but it was Fly Me to the Moon.
Okay.
And I had one night to learn it, and I didn't like the song. I could care less.
Right.
And I remember showing up to this placement uh, session, and I had this brand new Gibson ES 175, and the guys asked me to, what tune you're going to play. And I told him, he's like, that's my favorite song. Can I sing along? And it's just like, shit, I
Yeah.
didn't know it. I thought I could just noodle through like the first third of it and then call it a day.
Yeah.
But
Fuck.
I got called out.
Fuck. I feel it.
And
Oh my god.
yeah, so I just tried to get through it as best I could, just butchered it, and like got like 8 bars in, 10 bars in, because I was anxious now, and the guy was trying to sing, and it was just so embarrassing. And here I am, I have this like Cadillac of guitars, and I'm butchering the song. I look like a total, phony. What is this guy doing at Berkeley with his Cadillac on his lap? Um, and so I blew that, but for some reason they put me in the advanced. Maybe it was to like get back at me for not being prepared. I don't know, but they put me in like, I think it was like category. I was like 1 through 5, and they put me in 5, which is like the most advanced.
Fuck.
Yeah, and
Gotta
so I
learn
showed up for
quick.
my yeah, and so I remember going to this class, and you were speaking of Circle of Fifths earlier. I had no idea what they were, and I showed up to this first performance class for your principal instrument. And there's like 12 guys in there with the guitars and the instructor, and they're like, all right, to warm up, let's do a run of the Circle of Fifths. And I didn't know what the hell they're talking about, and everybody else was just on it.
Right.
And I was surprised that the professor didn't notice how bad I was. Small class, I wasn't doing shit. I didn't know what was going on, and it was. We had a few days before ad drop, and I was trying to, I tried to grab the professor, be like, man, there's been a mistake, and he's like, I got to run, I got a gig or something, and took off.
Damn.
And I just remember like, what the fuck? This is so I was overwhelmed,
Yeah.
I did end up dropping that class
What was
and
it?
getting more.
Was it like a basic improv type stuff, or?
I think it's called like performance.
Oh, okay.
If my memory serves me right, like you have your principal instrument, and then you have performance classes associated with your principal instrument,
Okay.
and then they're graded on your skill. And these guys were like, these were players, and I was not there. So there's a level of it that, there's a lot of intimidation. I remember having to learn an Al Green solo the first semester, and I put in like 35 hours in 1 week on one solo. And there's another five, there's 4 or 5 classes I have to do work for. So I mean, the first semester was intense. But then I got the groove, and my marks are good, and the new good performance class was a more appropriate level for me, and so I got more comfortable. And yeah, I thought the people were great. Um, the players are great. The instructors, and most of the instructors I had were great. Met some great friends that are still in my life. Drew Skinner, who's the first person I met at Berkeley, ended up being my
No shit. Okay. Well,
roommate.
yeah, and he's the guy
Yeah,
that you did a lot of these albums with.
yeah. We've been doing stuff for years.
What was it? Was guitar
Uh,
his main? Was he in the same
no,
thing? Okay.
he was a synth or music engineering
Okay.
major.
Okay. So,
You know, go on.
oh, I was gonna say, that's a good turn into the solo stuff. But before diving into that, music school is interesting because like in that like any college academic level, right? Because a lot of people go there knowing everything. You're like, why are you going to school if you already know this shit? And if you don't know it, they're like, why don't you know it? You're like, well, I'm here to learn it. So there's this weird like duality because I had this a very similar experience with like
Yeah.
we had an ensemble grouping or whatever, and they were trying to break it off, and they're like, everyone's calling tunes and playing like blue bossa, this stuff they can get away with, and I thought I had
Yeah.
How High the Moon down, and
Uh-huh.
I learned like a chord melody that I can play like maybe like 80 BB, slow, and like they were swinging the fuck out of it. I'm like and just butchered it, and like and all these other players are fucking really good, and like it's interesting that when you're surrounded by this like intense environment, like they can either cast a shadow of doubt or like cast rays of inspiration, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really a mental trick of how you interpret that and accept that and grow from it. And I'm
Yeah, I think
always
there's a duality to that. I think that doubt that you recognize in where you're sitting in your place with your instrument or where you're at academically, educationally, like that doubt drives that inspiration. You're like, well, Jesus Christ, I know this little, you
right,
know.
right. Yeah, it's all
What else?
connected. It has to be. Like you have to
Yeah,
hit the bottom and be like, I need to fucking like work on some basic shit.
yeah, yeah.
But okay,
So
so you start working with Drew, and like when do you start like really honing your songwriting? Like were you still writing through college, or like it sounds like there was no time to do it because you gotta fucking learn this shit, and you know what I mean. You don't have that much time to do it. But when did like a
uh, well, I got cozy pretty quick with like balancing expectations academically and having fun and playing. And Drew and I actually had a band the first semester.
what
So we
was
did
it?
we were called the Super Zeros,
A
and I actually played the bass. He played the drums, and then a buddy of ours, Pedro, played the guitar. And so it was kind of a fusion rock thing.
okay,
But then it was mixed with drum and like it was kind of like drum and bass fusion. So because Drew was big into electronic music. I don't know if I've ever said his name, how you say his name, but he was big into Amon Tobin,
okay,
Amon Tobin, however
yeah,
you say
yeah,
his name. I mean, I love the guy to death too, but I never heard of him. And so Drew was big into him, and then Aphex Twins and all this stuff. So the way he would drum was something I've never experienced before. I mean, it was like he drums like Amon Tobin. So that was a pretty cool
right. What a mind
experience, pretty
fuck.
cool little fusion band we were doing.
Yeah,
So we were doing writing then. Before I went to college, um, no, I'd say after I left, I was doing some writing at Berkeley. So I started work. I really started kind of working on songwriting there, and did a solo record when I after I left
okay,
college. Um, and so I was probably about 22 when I really made my first solo record that had some decently structured songs.
right. And is that like when you like found, like, because you have this like beautiful low tone, and like to find your voice like that, it takes a long time to find where you're at. Was that through that process? Did you find it, or did you come into recording kind of knowing where you were at vocally? Because
Um, I don't. I think there was ignorance. I don't think I'm the least comfortable instrument that I am with that I use is is my voice.
I understand that.
And yeah, and because it's so intimate and there's
Right,
no getting around it. There's no blaming the
right.
luthier or the manufacturer. It's just
It is what it is.
it is what it is, and I didn't know how to use it. And so for me, it was just I think actually the way I sing is a result of being really timid about my ability. Um, so I always sang, I think, pretty soft. Not when I was in high school, I belted it out, but I shouldn't have. It was terrible. But then I recognized that I got a little shy about it, so I sang softly, um, and that's just it's just
Right.
there's no thought. It was just what it was. Um, I took one vocal course for non-vocal majors in Berkeley, um, and that was uh, a little bit illuminating. It helped out a little bit around breath control,
Right.
but I don't think I ever really learned how to use my voice until maybe 5 years ago.
Okay. Well, I feel like with one college classes with the vocal college classes, right? When there's the bigger group of people. I don't know if this was a one-on-one or a bigger group, but
There's
like,
about seven of us.
yeah, it's hard to get the individualized attention and understand because a lot of that breathing technique is so much of a thing. You just keep doing these weird things and it makes sense later. It's like with piano, when you move your hands, eventually you're like, oh, it makes sense why I put my thumb here, then switch, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah,
these physically make sense. And with like vocal stuff, you can't hear it because it's coming out of you, and like, you know what I mean, there's
yeah,
no real like listen back. Like with guitar, you hear it as it's coming out, or with
yeah. And your head
anything.
voice and what you're hearing is different than reality.
Right, right, right. It's way like when you put your hands to the side of your ears and cut out all the bass from your face. You can like you're like, I sound like that. Like
Yeah,
it's a battle I've gone down the rabbit hole immensely trying to
yeah,
figure out. So I'm always interested in like songwriting and like how someone finds their voice. Um, but like
yeah. Go on.
I was gonna say, those classes kind of suck because they're so intimidating. When you're in a
Mm.
group and they're like, "All right, we're gonna do this piece from Hansel and Gretel," and you're like, "What?"
Well, yeah. Well, this one particular was like bring a song you want to
Oh,
sing, and
okay,
so
that's way cooler. Yeah, yeah.
you'd get up in front and you would sing to the other six classmates and the instructor, which was God, that was intimidating. I mean, it was a
Right.
small group, but still, yeah, an instrument that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm up there with there was always a piano player that would be your accompanist,
Okay.
and you bring in your tune, you had written out all the tablature for it, all the charting for it, and give it to the piano player, and then you just count in, and you're up there naked, and
Yeah, that's even worse
so
when you can't hide behind
yeah,
the guitar. Fuck.
yeah. So then he was also just reading my body language too. So not only are you trying to learn how to sing and breathe, then he's like, "Well, you're not moving right. Your posture's crap, and you're not looking at anybody." I'm like, "Man,
Ouch. I get, but fuck. Oh, I totally. Yeah, those classes are brutal. Um,
yeah,
but okay. So the more you do it and the more comfortable you get with how you sound, right? It kind of, you can work in those quarters. Like I can work with having a kind of quiet sound, and I can make that sound as good as I can. And
yeah."
like once you get this first record out, did you play out with it? Did you have a band with it, or did you just record it?
We just recorded it, and then we did a CD release event down in Pennsylvania. I live in Vermont,
Right.
and my sister's in Barcelona, and Drew's in L.A.
Fuck.
And so Drew didn't come out for it, but my sister Amanda flew in.
Oh, that's cool.
Um,
She made a way bigger hike, Drew.
yeah. She made a good trip out of it. She stayed for a month and visited all kinds of family and stuff. But I hired. That used to be my stomping grounds, like Philly area, and so I know a lot of players. So I reached out to some old friends of mine and said, who can put together a set with one rehearsal, and so we did do a show for the CD release. And that was great. The band was great. And so we did one show there, and then I came back down for another show in November. So we did the CD release in August of 19, and then I did another show up here in Vermont in October, and then we did one in November, and then COVID just,
Right. Fuck.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that changed the game for sure. I had a buddy who just
Yeah.
moved out to Vermont.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. James Muschler, he's a drummer. So if you're looking for
I
a drummer,
don't know.
uh,
What part of Vermont?
I don't know what part. I just talked with him and he's like, yeah, I'm moving out there. He's kind of a free spirit, so.
Yeah.
But if you're looking
Nice.
for a drummer, but
Well, yeah.
side note, so when did you go out to LA and start doing the studio work?
I never went. Well, I lived in LA for 3 years, but I never went out there to do studio work with him.
Okay. Because I read that
We did a.
you did
What's that?
I read that you were playing professionally in LA on your
Oh, yeah.
on your
I
thing.
was, but
Okay.
it wasn't any studio work.
Okay.
It was all performance stuff.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
What was that
So I'd
like
get hired.
compared?
Oh, that
Was
was
it like
great.
jazz
Yeah, I mean,
stuff? Was it like
what's that?
was it like jazz stuff? Was it like what type of what you're picking up with the gypsy thing? Like at this point you have all
Um,
these different spices you can throw in.
yeah. So I got hired to do a lot of the work I did was through a company called the Do Lab,
Yeah.
and they were an interesting troupe, a company out there. They're friends of mine from high school actually, but they moved out to LA and they started a company with another some Canadian girl out there, and it was like again, this is a really interesting company where they did and primarily event work. So they would it was a lot. They started off doing lighting for events, but then they started to do their own events. So they'd bring in artists and they would do the sound and the stage design and the lighting. And then they also then had a dance troupe that was did a lot of tribal kind of it was kind of like theater. It was kind of like theater stuff, but there was no overt storyline. It was more kind of implied. So it'd be like music intertwined with like a loose storyline and like some fire breathing and some circus elements. And then they actually expanded to do a big EDM festival called Lightning in a Bottle out there.
Whoa.
And we had a stage like a cello that they still run it to this day. So they did a lot of different event productions that were again kind of unique, like the circus type stuff. So we would write all the music for the whatever performance they were doing at the time. And then I get hired by other bands too. I do, for example, one of them was the Earth Harp. You ever hear of that?
Mm-mm. Not to check it out
Yeah.
though. What type of stuff?
He's nice guy,
Yeah.
super nice guy. He invented this instrument. It's the longest stringed instrument in the world.
Whoa. Okay.
Using
Makes
these
sense.
thick cables and then these boxes around it to give it a different vibration to change pitches. And use gloves and you pull on the cables and it makes a different pitch. I got hired to play with him a couple times. He was on 10 years after I played with those guys. I think that he was like runner up in America's Got Talent or something.
Damn.
Like that.
God, but man, that's interesting. This kind of like vague borders that have all this different creativity happening, and you happen to be by all these things, right? Like that's a horrible like metaphor for like a circus everywhere. But how cool to constantly be finding these environments where you have to adapt to whatever's there, and the predictability being like the world's biggest string instrument to like the crazy drum circles with jazz fusion guys like to be able
One
to.
time I was asked to play what was the instrument? The sitar.
Oh shit!
You know, yeah. And
Any
I
luck with
remember
that?
I had never played one in my life, and I remember talking to my buddy who's the owner of the Do Lab, and he's like, just take the job, and he's like, just tell him you know how to do it.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, and that's kind of, they named their company the Do Lab because they're like, just do it, like just we can make it happen. The saying was always, we can make it happen.
That's awesome.
Um, so and they, like I said, that company, they're from my hometown. So they didn't really run with that circle over at Cherrymont Farm, but they were like-minded people. So they kind of, there's a thread that kind of goes along with all of this. But I'd say the thing that connects, like the kind of the community that this is kind of, you can relate it all to, would be, early Burning Man community.
Gotcha.
They're, yeah, before that was on the map, these are the kind of folk that were coming out of Burning Man and traveling all over and doing these art installations and circuses and whatnot.
That's
So
sick. That's sick. So okay, when the first album you put out, was that High Low?
the first one with Amanda, yeah, and Drew,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so
hmm
let's kind of so after your first solo endeavor, when did High Low come as far as like in the chronological approach? Was there a few other records in between?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. So yeah, there were, but this is the first like real hard. Like this is the first legit, um, I'd say, product that I put out.
High Low.
Yeah, high
Okay.
low. The other stuff was, yeah, I put out probably like 5 CDs, but they were all back when things were like, analog and sound was a lot more difficult for
Yeah.
me to manipulate and make sound good.
Because I couldn't find them when I was doing research for you. I couldn't find anything other than High Low.
Yeah, there nothing's out on like nothing. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, before the days of um, streaming,
Right.
all these records were basically before the age of streaming. The last project I did was with Drew. We did like an EP in LA back in '06. And then I went off the map. Like I was playing, but I wasn't recording.
Mm.
So yeah, then there's not really anything that's been officially put out there besides High Low, and then theaters coming. In the theaters the next one.
Right. So
So
going into High Low, that was kind of like coming out of this like long. So you've had time to build up material and stuff, and
yeah,
right, because like that record kicks, man. There's a lot of good
thanks, man.
songs on that, and
Appreciate it.
you I don't know if maybe the other ones were leading up to this, but you have this space on this record that as soon as you put it on, like there's this vibe that comes out from it, and like
Yeah,
and it's like this mellow kind of like I to me that's what I and like I can feel the lushness of like jazz chords incorporated in there, even though they're maybe not as on the nose as like here's a fucking sharp 11, but
yeah.
there's like this warmth to those tunes. Um, is that something you like couldn't get out of those first attempts to record? That now that the technology was easier to manipulate, you could.
I think, in all honesty, there was no um, hubris to this record,
Okay.
and I think before this one, my best record was the first record I ever made. I was 22. I was pretty busted up emotionally. I just left college because of finances, no other reason. So
Yeah.
that I was pretty bummed out about that, and that was just a cathartic response to that experience. So it was all honest.
Right.
And then everything between that record and High Low was me in my 20s, not knowing who the hell I was and trying to impress people.
Mm.
So for me, it was all. I hate to say this to with the other guys that I was working with. We had a great time, but I think a lot of it ended up being kind of bullshit. It was good playing. It was a lot of good playing. We were good musicians. I think we did some solid work there, but the honesty wasn't there. This one came about. I think what you're hearing is just once again that throwback to, I'm not making this for anybody to hear. I'm not making this to for any other reason than to make it. Um, and I think that made a huge difference because we hadn't planned on releasing High Low. I mean, it was not on our
Huh.
radar. So I don't want to repeat the bio that's written on the, I don't want to sound like a
Right.
broken record if you read the bio, but it really was about my sister and I being like, man, we just, our time zones suck. We can't ever connect. It's hard, but we're like, let's just make tunes, and that'll be an excuse for us to touch base every couple weeks. And
Right. Okay.
um, so it was just, yeah. And the long answer is, I think it was just really honest, and um, and there's a lot of good material to pull from too, because I hadn't written an album in probably 5 years, and a lot of my life changed 180 when this record is coming out from a place in my life that is completely different from 5 years, from 5 years before it was born. So
Mm. Well, that makes sense. It definitely does have that honest approach to it. And so with your sister like involved with this was just you guys chatting like, "Hey, I have this demo I made. Can you add something to it?" Like, how did that process actually come together that you guys were writing songs together? Cuz I agree, that's an amazing way to stay in touch and like a
yeah,
good excuse to be like, "It's Thursday. What did you do?" Like,
yeah, for sure. It's like homework, but then your homework assignment's due on Sunday, but you don't get in trouble. Really, all it means is that you have to check in and say hi.
right, right.
So yeah, so it was great. And the way we did it wasn't like, well, I mean, it just varied. There was no, this is how we're going to do it. It was just, um, yeah. One tune was I work in psychiatry, and I was at um, I don't want to mislead anybody. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, not a medical doctor.
Right. I was going to ask you about
But
that, but so
yeah,
now you're like assisting clients,
no, I
residents.
mean, I have the same practicing privileges as a psychiatrist.
Okay. Damn. Okay.
So the role is no different. It's just that I have less debt.
Nice.
That's how I look at it. I'm sure an MD would probably tell you a little bit differently,
Sure,
but
but on the personal level, that's
yeah, I mean, I'm in a small hospital in Vermont, and I'm the only psych provider there. I do, I act in the same vein, the same role and same scope essentially as a psychiatrist. Um, Maybe a few nuances of difference, but not hard. You wouldn't be able to tell. Um, but like, for example, one tune, I went away for like an educational seminar on mindfulness and meditation.
okay.
And I got back from that, and I just remember hitting like a little motif on a little 5-note thing on the keyboard when I got home, just for whatever, and that turned into Silent Mind.
Okay.
Um, and that whole thing just happened, like that was written in probably 20 minutes.
Damn.
So that'd be an example of one tune that just manifested. Amanda didn't have much to do with it. And then I handed it over to Drew, and I said, Drew, just have fun with it. Um, and then there's other ones where Amanda and I would be very deliberate about the intentions. So there was no roadmap. It was just like
Gotcha.
whatever the moment or the song called for, or wherever your headspace was at. That's just, you just follow that.
Okay. That makes sense. That
Um,
it kind of feels like that because like the last tune on it, "Lie to Me," that like
yeah,
that duet. Like that
yeah,
seems like that's a very her involvement would be much more intentional than maybe like how you said Silent Mind. Like
yeah.
because like that song bumps too. That's a goodie. Like how you guys
Which
interplay
one?
with that. "Lie to Me," the last one.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah, that's she wrote that one 100%
oh,
prior
okay.
to start of the record, but it really was. Sorry, I have two kids, and I was just
Oh no,
distracted.
you're good. You're
Um,
good.
yeah, so she brought one tune that was completely written, and that was "Lie to Me," and then um, a couple that just kind of came out of nowhere that I did most of the work on. But then she'd participate in vocals or production work. She helped a lot with production work on the ones that I wrote solely. Um, and then the ones that were collaboratives, yeah, I mean, it was really a mix. I mean, there were some that were very intentional, like I said, that we were struggling through some grief where we lost a family member, and so we had to, like, somewhere like, let's write a song about this experience, and we would tackle it together 50-50. And others, she's like, oh, I wrote this back in the day, and let's do something with it.
What was
Um,
a tune like that? That
which
was
one?
which was kind of reminiscing on this family member.
That song was sent down. Well, there's two. One was Boxing Gloves.
Okay.
She wrote that about. So our stepfather died from pancreatic cancer, and she wrote Boxing Gloves after he passed. And then that one she did all on her own, but then I performed the singing and the guitars and stuff on it. But then Sent Down From Above was another tune about that, where she actually said, let's write a song about, because we're all, a lot of us were having kids at the same time that we lost our stepfather, and she's like, let's write a kind of a counter to the grief of Boxing Gloves, and write one about, like, birth and the cycle of life. So we co-wrote then Sent Down From Above very intentionally. It then took its own, it kind of morphed off of the initial intention, and it was more of another song about grief, but you go where it takes you.
Yeah.
So
both beautiful tunes.
Thanks, man.
Was it what about Joyride? That wasn't about anyone dying, because that's like the most beautiful song that says you're gonna die in it.
No, so that's another one she wrote before the project.
Okay.
And she pulled out of it.
Right. So I was well, actually, when did you get into the psychiatric field? Because I went to Cleveland State for music therapy, and I've done a lot of like nursing home gigs and type of healthcare centers and stuff. So I've been around like the culture in a way. But what brought you to that? Like,
so roundabout, I'll try to be quick about my answer. Yeah, so I was, doing music and all that stuff, event production stuff, and then my wife got into grad school in Boston. We were in LA. She got into grad school in Boston, and that's when I went to Europe and did some playing while she was starting her studies. So that took her to Boston, and so when I got back from Europe, that was our new kind of base. And I hadn't finished my degree because at Berkeley I ran out of cash and I couldn't, so
yeah.
And so she kind of inspired me to get back into school. And the long and the short of it was just I went through, various courses in psychology, kind of spoke to me. So I got a degree in psychology and got a job at a psychiatric hospital afterwards.
Yeah.
Where we would have people like yourself coming in. We had music groups and all that. And I was going to go for a doctorate in psychology. I was going to get a PhD in psychology. Whew. And then I talked to the psychiatrist there, the nurses, the psychologists, various people. And my landlord was a nurse practitioner. I was also working in a cognitive science lab on campus.
That's cool.
So I was digging like the neuroscience stuff and the medical stuff. And basically my landlord was like, well, you can kind of merge all that together a little, kind of works with as a psych NP. You can do a bit of, you got the science, you got the, the people connection, the healing, so it's kind of, I got the nudge from him, and so that's what I did.
Nice.
So
yeah, that makes sense, because then you get it's like the perfect fit, finding all these things. And the I don't know if you ever dove into like the neuroscience of how like your brain's affected by music.
Yeah.
Like, man, that shit's cool.
Yeah, a little bit. I was doing more visual perceptual, like visual stuff at the lab, but yeah. I mean, neuroscience is freaking. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's a really, really great field. I loved working in the lab. I loved the courses in that too. So, college is a lot like. I mean, if you're not set in stone, it's a lot like feeling your way through a room in the dark. You're just kind of, you're letting things kind of come to you. You're kind of feeling things out, and so it all just kind of came together. It wasn't an idea to start with.
It's like being on the farm again.
Yeah.
What is it? It's interesting, like the visual perceptual. I know this is off the beaten course, but that is such a complicated thing. Neurological, like this, how we see is such a fucked up process. Like how everything's flipped. Like how'd you start to understand that? Like,
well, I don't know if I do anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, because that would have been 2011, 10 and 11. I was working in the lab.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that
But
makes
what's that?
no, that makes me feel much better because I've studied all this stuff because I got my certification with music therapy and I did the neuro music therapy certificate as well, and like learning all this shit about the brain and always having to remind myself. I'm like, why
Yeah,
won't it stick in my fucking head?
I know.
Like, so
I mean,
it's
it
comforting to
is.
know that you don't
You're
remember
not
the
the
whole.
only one.
Yeah. um,
But you are right, man. I mean, when you're like, it's hard. It's really trippy to learn about how we process things. I mean, the fact that first of all, like we see everything upside down and backwards.
right? It's
You
fucking
know?
crazy.
Yeah, and then your brain twists it all around for you, so it makes sense. Or colors aren't. Oh man, what is going on with this thing?
Are you melting? I can still
My
hear you.
my earbuds.
Oh, okay. All right. Well.
There we go.
Okay.
The I guess my electronics were not ready for the early heat.
I know. Now it's finally getting warm.
I'm loving it. I forget what I was going to say about the like colors. I mean, I'm not sure what you remember about that, but colors are just different, basically wavelengths that are being reflected at us.
Right.
So it's just an interpretation of wavelengths, and like the fall is just like the dying of pigmentation in leaves that causes a different wavelength. So you're seeing these variations in colors. It's all signals. It's not. Is it reality? Like
Right.
it's
It's so
crazy.
that is so crazy. And it's all the perception of it. Like our brains like can process those signals. So red's red for us, but red for humans, but red to any other type of living being may not even exist.
Right. Right.
And it's something you fundamentally know. Even if
Yeah.
you're colorblind, you know there's colors, right? Even if you can't
Yep.
see them, you know they're there. And there's, but fuck, so cool.
Yeah.
This another podcast. We'll have music in the brain or whatever. Put a pin in
Yeah,
that.
it's
But
like the best explanation you have for like neuroscience and perception is like if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? And the answer is really it makes the potential for a sound, but you need the vector to interpret
right,
data.
right. I was just reading,
So
rereading, Daniel Levitin's book. Your brain. This is your brain on music.
yeah,
Have you ever read any?
I have not read
Okay.
it, but if you recommend it, I'll check it out.
I think you'll dig it. It's like a lighter way into it, but since you've dove into like actual neural science, you might dig like a Tout, some of Michael Tout's stuff. He's like a neurologic music therapist, like head dude for like all the. This is a horrible explanation, but like he's like the kind of founder. He is the founder of neurologic music therapy, and
Interesting.
a lot of his studies and like written art journals and articles are all very very like academic based and dry and to the point, and they're all like 100% evidence based, and like it's as far as like that type of read, anything
Yeah,
Michael Tout. But as far as like a lighter read, Daniel Levitin, he's got the This Is Your Brain on Music and The World in Six Songs, which takes like an evolutionary standpoint to music, which is also very
interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Shoot me a text if you remember. Shoot me a text of the
yeah,
author.
yeah, I will. But anywho, so let's get to theater while you're here. Let's Which is coming out May
What's
7th.
that?
Right. But so I didn't get a rip of it. I don't know if there's any rips of it out.
You don't have any of it?
No, 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 I didn't get a rip of it. But I know it's more rock driven from the high low, and
Yeah.
like just the name of it, right? And out of everything we've talked about, the theaters that you've been through, like the amount of different exposure to new types of art and crazy types of art and all these modes of self expression. How does that boil into this? Because I feel like it has to.
Into this one. Well, I'd say the name may throw you with what you and I have been talking about.
Okay, it was
It
all
definitely is. Um, it definitely is more rock driven. And I'm not sure. I think that probably has to do with the fact that I bought a Guild Starfire 4,
sick.
like right before I started writing for this tune or this record. Um, so whereas before I hadn't had an electric guitar in a while. But so theater is basically the title, and I don't want to get too political, Um, but there's been a lot of theater this past year,
Mm.
and that's the inspiration
Okay. Okay.
for the name of the album. And one of the titles, basically there's a title song called Theater as well.
Right.
And it's just basically me being really frustrated. I mean, I can speak a little more. I can get a little bit political, but not much, because it's more of almost. Well, this song was definitely, or this record was definitely much more of a solo effort than High Low.
Okay.
Um, so I can speak for me. I won't bring my sister into the political stuff, but
Gotcha.
um, just being in healthcare, for one,
Fuck. Yeah, there you go.
during the pandemic, and coming from a science background and liking things like evidence-based approaches and trusting experts, and that was all just being pissed on.
Right.
And that was a hard thing to swallow, because it affected a lot of people and caused a lot of suffering. So that was a component of it. Like, kind of how a lot of these leaders and people that are seeking power and people that are in positions of power, they kind of create a lot of theater, and don't take a lot of responsibility or accountability for how that impacts citizens
Yeah.
and people that are vulnerable, and people that don't understand the science necessarily, or have the means to protect themselves from certain circumstances. And there's just so much chaos and fear and anger and lying going on, and division, that it just was pissing me off. And so this record is really, a lot of it is a result of that.
Right.
Um, so, yep.
Well,
Yeah. I
when you
mean,
see it firsthand like that, and when like so much time goes into, say, a drug to help, I don't know, whatever, the knee contortions, or I don't, it's some
yeah,
crazy thing, right? And like to be able to explain how that works to somebody in like a quick, log line of like, oh, it does that, does that, and does that, is absurd because of the amount of time it goes in to learn the process on like a biochemical level, on a like everything's connected, everything functions and does something to everything else in your body, and like
yeah,
just to dispute someone who put their whole life into understanding how to make the knee contortions. I'm just making up, you know what I mean?
yeah.
But to understand how this drug fixes it, and like it's you, there's no way you would have to like take a fucking course on it. You can't just like
You can be an
log
expert.
line it and like
Yeah,
truly
yeah,
understand it, especially with something like with the pandemic that's been so generalized in so many wrong ways.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh man,
yeah. And it's, I am the first, and this is, I don't want to give, the wrong idea about challenging one's fixed opinions. I think
right,
that's what
right,
science is about, is that you want to, you want
100%.
to actually prove yourself wrong, not prove yourself
Yes,
right.
yes.
And there's a whole lot of proving yourself right going on, and it's making a mess of things. And
That's
um,
that's the
so it's,
pseudoscience, right?
what,
The pseudoscience approach when you prove yourself right.
yeah, yeah. So that's really, I mean, it just, just watching the amount of hate that was kind of exploding in this country. The disregard for like environmental concerns was another huge issue that was kind of being shelved. And then the pandemic and the dog and pony show that some of these leaders were putting on and ignoring science, and it just really, it really affected me, because I'm in psychiatry. I work in a hospital. I work in the ER in the hospital and the outpatient clinic, dealing with patients day in and day out. And I'm not treating COVID, but I'm treating the emotion, the psychiatric, the emotional needs of a lot of patients that are facing these issues, losing family members or losing their jobs or losing, and just watching that amount of suffering. Um, this record was just a real cathartic release for all of that, for all those feelings. So I'm sorry I didn't get a copy, man. I wish
No,
I would have
it's
sent
good.
you.
I
Yeah, I mean,
with so on that point, or before we get to that, so it comes out May 7th on all streaming
yeah,
platforms, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be fucking kick ass, and like with the vibe that High Low has, putting some angst and anger into that, it's going to be even cooler. So, um,
I hope, man. I hope. I will say I had another interview where somebody, another podcast, said it's the chillest angry music I've ever heard. So it's still got that vibe of like, I still sing pretty low and chill. It's not, uh, Muse or, it's not crazy heavy, but it's definitely more rock influence, heavier, more consistent, heavier drums, electric guitar, at least the first 6 tracks, and then the last 4 tracks gets a bit, it changes a little bit in the last 4 tracks, but yeah, I mean, again, my measure of success is not being embarrassed by it. Like, and
that's a good measure. That's a good
yeah,
measure
I
to be
mean,
proud of what you did, no matter
yeah,
like what it is. I think that is success. Fuck.
yeah,
Like, wow,
yeah.
that awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me and talking with me for like an hour and a half. I appreciate this. This has been awesome. I look forward to being able to hear it on May 7th when it comes out. I'm
Yeah,
gonna do.
do you want me to, sorry to interrupt, do you want me to send you any of that so you have somewhat of a voice around it
Yeah.
when you're, yeah?
All right, Benjamin. Thanks for hanging out, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it.
Perfect.